Welcome everyone, Questini here with a discussion about Norsca in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now this is one of those races in the game that does have power behind them. You certainly can make a campaign work as them fairly well, but they also have issues. So in this video I want to talk about those issues and what I would personally do in order to fix Norsca to make for a better campaign experience than the one we currently have. So, one of the fundamental problems of Norsca in a campaign, and probably the most fundamental problems actually, can be demonstrated here at this particular settlement. This is a campaign turn 64. So, what you have and what's really broken about Norsca is the following. You go into a battle. Now over here you can see I have a bunch of gold ranked units. I'll talk a bit about Norsca's strengths. But I go into this battle, right? No problem, just let's auto-resolve it. Okay, so the issue comes up right here on the screen. These three choices, really, it's not just three choices, but let's go with that. So first off, you can raise it for one of the particular gods. So you can talk about Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch. Now, the reason you'd go to raise it, and you have to raise it for your long campaign victory condition, comes down to the various favor of the gods that you're looking to build up in a campaign. You can build up favor with multiple gods at the same time. Personally, I would limit it to just two. And I also have to say that Slaanesh and Nurgle beat the other two out of the water, because all of them do give an income from ports benefit, sure. But when you're looking at, like, the Nurgle benefits, 20% casualty recruitment faction Y, casualty replenishment faction Y, that's pretty high. Or Slaanesh's benefit of lower crew rank and upkeep of minus 10% compared to weapon strength for melee units, or if we look at Tzeentch research rate and wins a magic power reserve. Yeah, I think I know where I'm gonna spend all these points. Now, you could try and build up all four gods in a campaign, actually, though there is a limit to that. But the problem is you're getting 6, so maybe at most you can get 3. I'd say 4 is really pushing it, because you're losing 2 with all the others. So you know, getting all 4 probably hard. 3, let's say you want to go with you initially go with Nurgle because you want the casualty replenishment. Then you go with Slaanesh for upkeep and lower crew rank. Okay, fair enough. But beyond that, like Khorne, let's say with that, I would personally go with Khorne over. I would personally go with Khorne over Tzeentch. That's just my personal perspective on that. And the reason you want to do that, by the way, is not even to do with the weapon strength or unit experience, just to get that 40% income from ports. So okay, that's one of the annoying things to talk about, that you have to constantly build favor, but you're losing favor with others. Trying to balance it out between all of them is annoying. But the second thing is, Norsca is a race that's built around sacking income. They can't occupy and loot a settlement. They have to sack it. The fact they don't have occupy and looting is actually a far bigger problem than you might believe, because you either get absolutely no gold besides just the money you get from fighting the battle, or you get a lot of gold potentially. In this case, actually very little, but there are settlements that can give you a significant amount. But you're also degrading the level of the settlement that you may want to occupy, because obviously you want to occupy territory, especially close to the front line. Problem is, once you obviously sack a settlement, you can't raise it the same turn, and that's the problem there. Those two choices over there with a settlement: either you sack it or occupy, right, or you raise it the turn that you attack it. And the problem with that is you end up wasting a lot of freaking time in a campaign over this. I'm not joking with respect to this. Like, there's so much time wasted in a campaign just over the idea of, oh, I want to sack a settlement for the sake of money, but I also want to raise a settlement for the sake of favor of the gods. By the way, I obviously need money to win my campaign, but I also need to get allegiance to the gods in order to win the campaign. Like, you may achieve your long campaign victory condition long before you're even remotely close to the allegiance with one particular god. You gain very little favor from, like, you're gaining far too little favor with the gods, considering what you're losing. Keep it in mind, because you're obviously losing the opportunity to sack a settlement, or you're wasting one turn of your campaign. Now, you could say, oh, just play Norsca slower, but people need to realize why this idea of an aggressive playstyle is pushed so heavily, like, by content creators like myself. Because if you sit on your ass, let me just say that, you see what the Empire has here? Let me explain what the Empire has here, and them unleashing stack upon stack against you in a campaign. And it's not like Norsca has incredible mobility. In fact, all of this, like sacking, raising settlements, occupying them potentially, like what you would potentially, like, let's say you want to take some territory. First, you'd want to sack it, then you'd want to wait one turn to raise it, and maybe you get lucky and the army that just raised it isn't moving from position, or more likely, you're going to have to bring a second army in order to occupy it and then rebuild it from scratch. That is how you play as Norsca. Now, in this case, I have 3 armies over here, like the invasion of the Darklands is ongoing. We are the Green Tide. Okay. But beyond those 2 choices, 3 choices really, there's another choice here. And this is where it gets completely broken. See, when you obviously sack a settlement, and when you raise a settlement, you're obviously reducing its level. Guess what you may now want to do in a campaign as Norsca, because you may want to occupy these settlements at the level they're on. Well, the problem is, Norsca's one of the strengths that Norsca has, beyond the various faction benefits with ports and all that, and the powerful armies, because that's one of the things Norsca does have. It has incredibly powerful infantry armies. Lighter on the armor side, though, to be fair, you can get units with reasonably high level of armor at tier 3. A bit lighter on the armor side, but let's just say Norsca certainly has powerful armies. But another thing that they can do in a campaign is they can vassalize factions through diplomacy. To be sure, but they can vassalize a lot of factions through diplomacy. And you're probably going to need to do it because Norscans, they just don't necessarily have the economy to support the armies in a campaign. Like, this is turn 64, I've got 9 armies. Sure, you might say, oh, you don't have a lot of settlements. Well, capturing a lot of settlements as Norsca is generally not worth it, because the income you're generating is freaking pathetic, and CA deliberately nerfed this. It's like, oh, we want Norsca to focus on naval aggression. Okay, I'll explain why their economy doesn't work in just a moment, but you end up in this campaign dynamic where you want to vassalize factions, but you also want to sack settlements, you also want to raise settlements, and all at the same time. That is incredibly broken as a mechanic. Now, if you're thinking, oh, vassalization is very powerful, right? Because you look at this particular campaign, you look at the diplomacy status. I've got Malice Darkblade, I've got Karl Franz, I've got Grimgore. I am not at risk of losing this campaign anytime soon. But it's such a shitty mechanic. You spend so many turns just taking territory, like first sacking it, then raising it, then occupying it, then rebuilding it, selling it to the AI after you've rebuilt it, specifically built barracks in it, all that kind of stuff. Unless it's territory that you want to hold for whatever reason. I'll get into why you might want to hold certain territory, like, say, Altdorf, though in this case I think I'm probably going to sell it to Karl Franz, or maybe I won't. I don't know. You spend so much time, and it's not exactly a fun experience having to spend so many resources on settlements. You probably will actually end up spending more resources to make these settlements worthwhile, to give them to the AI, to your AI vassals in the first place, to get money, to fuel your economy. Like, it's not exactly great for Warriors of Chaos, for them how they do it, but here's the thing about Warriors of Chaos. You play a Warriors of Chaos campaign, okay? You can just take every settlement, because you have the economy to do it. You don't have to raise settlements in a Warriors of Chaos campaign. You might benefit from it, to be sure, but you don't have to raise settlements in a Warriors of Chaos campaign. And then, let's say you're launching an invasion of the Empire as Warriors of Chaos. Here's how you do it. You wouldn't ignore certain bits of territory deliberately because you don't want to weaken them. You would reduce them to nothing, subjugate them, because you don't have that ability as an Norsca. You can't subjugate. So you can only vassalize for diplomacy. So Warriors of Chaos ends up being better in that respect, and they also don't have to deal with this crap, because for them, Favor of the Gods comes from a unique mechanic, from the Souls mechanic, and it works significantly better. Maybe that's the first thing that should be changed. Maybe not quite the same way as, you know, Gifts of Chaos and all that, because that system has its own can of worms with it. But I feel like compared to this filling up this bar over here, it would be far better. That's the first issue. That constant dynamics of elements. Sacking them, raising them, occupying them, selling them, all having to do it. Like, seriously, if I didn't have to do that shit in this campaign, I would be far stronger in this campaign. Like, turn 64, yes, I've been fighting across the freaking world with multiple armies that are unbeatable. To be fair, beating up the Empire, is that any kind of prize? Like, the only challenge you might have in a Norscan campaign is early on. I mean, to be fair, I'm sure Vlad over here with his armies is probably going to teach me that. Then again, he is up against a bunch of trolls over here. Sure, some regular shitty marauders, but hey, trolls. Really, trolls. I mean, I'm tempted to just take this army and maybe change some of the items over here. Alright, so you have that problem. Second problem, let's talk about this. Lore choices. Freaking horrible. Just add more. No, like, seriously, you only have one lore choice. Now, it's not necessarily the worst lore choice in the world. Like, Marauder Chieftains are not necessarily very weak, though they're not particularly great either. I mean, Surfa, sure, he's Surfa, right? He's a meme. But, like, you look at the choices over here, and to be honest with you, like, the choice over here matters so freaking little. Like, I expect so very little. You look at these like, oh, you get melee attack and charge bonus and all that, but you have to decide what you're gonna get. You're not gonna get everything. To be fair, you do have a War Mammoth as a mount, which is scary as all hell, I have to say. You can get regeneration, but really, you're gonna probably want to prioritize the blue skill line, and this ties into another problem Norsca has, but you're probably gonna want to prioritize the blue skill line, specifically growth and replenishment, and also upkeep. Because you need growth to rebuild all those elements you're destroying. You need casualty replenishment because obviously you do. Like, you can get 9% from the blue skill line. And really, the final skill of Spawn of Chaos, that 150 experience per turn, is actually pretty damn sweet to have. So that's how you get very, very experienced armies. Not through fighting the battles. No, this is through, like, outside of these stopgap marauders, these units get a lot of experience just passively, you sitting on your ass. Like, this army has been sitting over here in Drakenhof for like 20 turns or so. It's like gold ranked units. And the reason it's been doing so is because I couldn't finish off Vlad. I had like other priorities. That might have been a mistake over there. But still, I want Vlad to come in over here. So the one lore choice, like the way the skill line feels, is not exactly that particularly fun, I have to say, but that's not the biggest problem. To be fair, you do get some significant level of power with your units. Like, this is how Norscan armies end up being pretty powerful, because they get a significant amount of experience and a good amount of casualty replenishment without having a hero for that. And you do have a hero for casualty replenishment, so you're looking at like close to 30% casualty replenishment if you go in Nurgle and you get this blue skill line for a Marauder Chieftain. But you only have Marauder Chieftain. The only other lore choices are like if you go full on with Nurgle or full on with Siege. You, by the way, can't choose to go with all the gods. You gotta pick, like at level 3, gotta pick one, essentially. And by the way, when you get to level 3, it locks you out from the others. Like, you can't do it anymore. So it's like, hey, you want to get level 2? Good luck. Like, I have to say this because it sounds so horrible to just spell it out, but like the Demon Prince has a better way of doing this. Daniel of the freaking fucking things in a campaign. Freaking Daniel does this better. Jeez. And mind you, Daniel is pretty terrible, but at least he can get glory in multiple ways other than just raising elements. Okay, to be fair, you can get glory with monster hunts. Those are annoying. Those are really, really annoying. I'm not gonna lie. Like, doing monster hunts in this game is genuinely one of the most annoying things in the game. So, okay, you can dedicate a monster hunt to a particular god. Here's the reason you don't give a shit about monster hunts. First off, you actually need to research them, which takes a while. Like, it's not necessarily fast. Like, level 1 ones, sure, no problem. Level 2, level 3, the problem is also the time it takes to do it. So, like, for instance, the monster hunt I have, it's like, go all the way to Valea's freaking Sorrow, and, oh, jeez, go all the way to Valea's Sorrow, in a freaking campaign where you have no special movement, and you start here. This is bullshit. This is, like, ridiculous to a new level. Oh, and best part is these quests, these monster hunts might bug out. You, by the way, want to complete them because it's like that's just how the game rolls. Your long campaign victory condition is actually pretty damn freaking incredible. 10 low recruit rank, add that to Slanesh, your 15 low recruit rank. Yeah, that's pretty damn powerful. Problem is, you gotta go do all this shit. You gotta build up that favor with the gods. You gotta do those monster hunts. It's not conducive towards your campaign. Like, it has to be said, in a Warhammer free campaign, you gotta take a lot of territory, one way or another, even if you're not gonna keep it. But when I'm having to stop constantly, not because I need to. I don't need to stop. Like, I don't need from an economic standpoint to stop. I don't need from a casualty replenishment standpoint to stop. I don't need to stop because of my army. The only threat that Norsca is going to face early on that's actually a genuine threat is, funnily enough, Kislev, because the low armor units that Norsca has makes them especially vulnerable to Kislev, not so much the Empire. Because the Empire... Yeah, let's just say Akshina versus anything in the range roster of the Empire, you know who wins that. Or just Kossars in general are significantly better than, like... Well, it's also AI priorities. Like, Kislev's always going to recruit a lot of Kossars. The Empire may not recruit a bunch of archers and crossbowmen to harass the crap out of you. And besides, Kislev units have significantly higher morale, so they actually end up doing significantly higher damage. Though Marauder Berserkers in a fight, well, they build up that physical resistance, it gets funny. Like, once you engage in melee, like, engaging in melee against Kislev, that's tricky. But besides, Kislev has a lot of issues in their own. You don't have to deal with Kislevs. Like, Dwarves might be a problem, Kislev might be a problem, but they've got other issues. Like, your main opponent in the campaign is actually going to be the Empire. Or Bretonia. Or Vlad, basically melee factions. Guess what you are? A melee faction with very powerful units in melee. Like, you can play many powerful melee factions against Norsca, and actually engaging in melee with that melee, look at some of their units, they can kind of end up being crazy. So that's one of the strengths, but you gotta really change that dynamic. Better skill line for their lords, more lord choices. Then there's the economic problem. So, because this really pushes the issue of relying on sacking settlements. So all these gods give you a lot of income from ports. So the idea from Creative Assembly is that, well, Norsca should be a naval faction, focused on naval power. Of course, let's ignore the fact that not even all of Norsca has enough ports to satisfy their economy, and while sure, an individual port at tier 3 may generate 1,500 income, and once you get enough favor with the gods, and obviously we can even double that, sure, 3,000, let's say that, right, like 3,000 from a port. Problem with ports, twofold. One, they cost a lot, and you don't really have a significant amount of money for them in the first place. Two, they're actually some of the most vulnerable settlements in the game because Norsca doesn't have great defenses. They don't necessarily get along well with a lot of people. To be fair here, you have to cheese the vassal system. That's the thing. Like, you go on wars of rampage, conquering vast territory, selling it to your vassal, like I did over here in Coalmires, because you have no choice. If you just let these factions alive, they will declare war on you. Like, let me ignore the fact that I've somehow magically avoided a war with Wulfric, which is pretty tall order in a campaign. Norscans will fight each other. Like, they're not quite as hated as Skaven in a campaign map, but they're pretty damn close when we're looking at how much people hate them. So all of that hatred means vulnerabilities. You don't have great defenses, you're an offensive faction, but you don't generate a lot of money for rigorous elements, you're slowed down constantly. Like, a great offensive faction is something like freaking Greenskins, Dark Elves, even Khorne, because they just raise shit to the ground, or they sack it in the case of the Greenskins, occupy it, the same turn, move the fuck on. Or in the case of Greenskins, occupy and loot, get a significant amount of money from occupying and looting, maybe not as much as pure sacking, sure, but still enough, right? If you're looking to maintain the level of the settlement, and then move on. You don't have to worry about rebellions. To be fair, neither does Norsca, because caste corruption generates 10 control, but you do have to worry about like constantly stopping, because your economy at home is not great, it's vulnerable, so you've got the faction that should thrive on aggression having to constantly stop and not generating enough economy back home, especially in land settlements. And since a lot of the map is on land, and a lot of the opponents you have on our land, you having only 150 income from slavery's camp is actually pretty crap in a campaign. So another one of the issues. And CA deliberately nerfed this land-based economy for whatever unknowable reason. Now, I've made a point on a lot of videos about the economy. Yeah, this should be doubled back again. And other factions like Kislev, Sunshine Land, that have a poor economy, need to earn more. 150 income at tier 3 for 1,000 gold. The Greenskins, who are also a very aggressive faction, generating 250 for 250 from the very beginning of their campaign at tier 1. Just, you understand why Greenskins are a top tier race when Norsca isn't a top tier race. So, yeah, their land-based economy needs to be buffed quite a bit. You still would want ports, ultimately, because they generate significantly more, sure, but there's kind of that trade-off. Like, what, is CA thinking that anyone would play Norsca in a defensive manner? You shouldn't. It really shouldn't, because your defenses are not great. You're not a turtling faction. You're the faction you build an army of berserkers, you charge the crap out of the enemy, because that's the way you win battles. And you try and stop as little as possible. That's how you play Norsca. Also, like, special trade resources don't really generate a lot. I mean, they do have some nice effects over here, right? There are certain effects that they can do in a campaign. Certain resources, like Marauder, recruitment units, if you get iron and all that. There's some nice effects there, but there's also a lot of annoyances. And yeah, there's some power over there with certain trade resources, though not all of them, but still some benefits over there. And then on top of that, let's talk about hero capacity, because this is a problem. The reason you almost always want to go Nurgle in a campaign is your hero capacity for replenishment heroes, even the recruitment, is at tier 4. Now, there's a reason you play Trog as opposed to Wulfric. He starts with a hero with casualty replenishment, whereas poor Wulfric starts with a mage. It's like, oh great. And this is not a small issue either. Having good casualty replenishment as Norsca is important, because guess what? You have a bunch of units that will take a lot of damage in virtually every battle you fight, regardless of against which opponent you're playing. So your early game ends up being miserable because you have no way of replenishing. You have to play in such a way you minimize the losses as a low armor faction with melee. That's fun. And it takes you until tier 4. And you don't really have the best growth in the world with respect to Norsca. I mean, it's not horrible compared to some other factions, but like, it's not dwarves horrible, but still, it's just mediocre, really. It's mediocre growth, and you would need better, really, because you need to get to tier 4. Also, the fact that you don't have exceptional growth like the Greenskins means that a lot of the fun options, like the Mammoths and the Frostworms and the Fenrir Warriors with great weapons, all that kind of stuff, those Skinwolves, like even armored Skinwolves, even tier 4, like right now, considering the pacing of Warhammer free campaign, everything that's above tier 3 is just literally a unit you're not going to use for the vast majority of the campaign. That's something I would say CA needs to change in general about the game, because right now, like, to be fair, it's not like previous Total Wars are any different. Like, a lot of Total Wars are focused on early game aggression because that's where it matters. Here's what's even more fun about this, all of this, though. About settlements. You have a shitty research tree that, oh, you get a significant number of benefits if you occupy certain settlements. Like, seriously, you take Kislev and you can get the research that reduces the attrition suffered by casualties from all types of attrition and unit mass. Yeah, put that on mammoths, let's talk about that. But you need to occupy settlements around the freaking world. Now, to be fair, the idea, the intent I imagine behind this, and this intent was behind Warhammer 1, because Norsca was developed for Warhammer 1, right at the very end of it, as a pre-order bonus for Warhammer 2. But the intent of it, like, if you consider the Warhammer 1 map, sure, there was stuff added for High Elves, Vampire Coast, all that kind of stuff, just added on it. But, like, all of that research is just built around the idea of, like, a very, very long campaign. And it's not like, oh, I'm gonna go to Wolf 1. To be fair, at least climate isn't as much of a problem. The only uninhabitable place, like in Trog's campaign, is the ocean. Desert and magical forests are unpleasant. So you have a great climate suitability situation, which would be fun, except you're moving dirt slow on the campaign map. It's not like you have a major benefit at sea, which you probably should. Like Norsca being, you know, a naval dominance faction that has quests around the entire freaking world, should potentially be able to move faster around the world. You know what makes Wulfric special in the lore, beyond his ability to speak in every language and be very creative with his insults? It's the ability of moving fast around the freaking world. Teleportation. Just a notion over there that Wulfric does have in his campaign that makes him special, that you don't have available here in the Norscan campaign. Like, consider Oxyatel's teleportation mechanics, or how fast Skarbrand can move on a map, or Taurus can move on a map, and Norsca ain't got nothing on that, basically. When they should. Like, it really should. Like, moving faster from battle to battle to battle would really suit them very, very well in a campaign, in a significant number of ways, as opposed to constantly having to, oh, go to a settlement, make sure your favor is up with the particular god. Oh, it's okay, let's go with the hound, right? Let's just raise it, make sure it doesn't drop below, like, you know, 2 points. Maybe you get lucky, the army doesn't move away from the settlement. Jeez. Also, can we talk about the fact that Norsca has some really great units at tier 3 in terms of Marauder champions, but they take 2 freaking units to recruit by default? Yeah, that's great. You can at least increase recruitment, local recruitment capacity for buildings as opposed to freaking research in some cases. And it's pretty decent, actually. 2 local recruit capacity at tier 2. Dwarves should take note. You may not build this building just for that sake, though, to be fair, you're also reducing recruitment cost by 10%, so don't underestimate that. Like, that's the thing, I want to like Norsca, but like the constant stoppage in a campaign, the issue with lords, the issues with heroes, just overall campaign dynamics really prevent it. Also, lack of variety, only 2 legendary lords. And while you might think that Confederation mechanic, that unique Confederation mechanic that the Greenskins then stole, sounds great, in reality I think it just hasn't aged that particularly well in a campaign. That's just my perspective on it. I feel like C8 really just needs to consider it. But by the way, you might think like, oh, you should Confederate factions when you beat up their lore. No, like, one of the things I've learned is like, yeah, it sounds great to gain almost an entire province as Trog, but really you're losing a lot of experience, a lot of money from, you know, not sacking these settlements, which are tier 1 anyway. So might as well take your time, build up your forces, and then go after the dwarves. Just a lesson. You can go after the dwarves directly. They're going to take some turns to just recruit unit berserkers and then unleash them on the dwarves. And it will work. But just, it's not, it kind of slows you down. And the worst thing, by the way, you can do in a Norscan campaign, kind of final point about this, is like, the worst thing you can do in a Norscan campaign is actually Confederate All of Norsca. I know that sounds crazy, but you might actually end up benefiting from not doing that, because it means you don't gain a vast array of territory that's only at low levels, because you can Confederate All of Norsca very quickly in a campaign if you play your cards right. Like, just let Wulfric, and let's say you're playing Trog, just let Wulfric deal with all the rest, then you go beat him up, right? You get vast all of Norsca. Sounds great, except your economy is not generating enough, except your ports, which are now going to be prime target for everyone. Oh, by the way, you controlling a vast array of territory means that you're viewed as a major threat by everyone, so guess what everyone's going to do against you? Enjoy dealing with that shit. It's not going to be particularly fun. That's also something I would seek to change, the way that specific confederation works, or at least make the Norscans get along with each other somewhat. I mean, you can avoid a war if you really want to by paying cash in that, and deliberately avoiding confederating. Like that's the thing. You have a mechanic like tells you when you beat up the leader of another faction, say, hey, you want to confederate this other faction? It's like, and you might be tempted to say, yeah, let me just do it. You really shouldn't. Like, just kill him or let them go for diplomatic relations benefit. But don't do it because you're going to end up regretting that particular choice. At least if you do it too early. Right now, yeah, I would totally take Wulfric. 60 turns in a campaign. That's a bit of a difference for obvious reasons. And that's assuming you even catch the guy. Now, it works, like, it would work in the long term, but short term, like, you have a lot of these systems that are really built for a very, very long campaign in a game that's not really designed around that right now. That's kind of the problem. And it's not just an issue about Warhammer 3 even, or Immortal Empires, Realms of Chaos. Like, you look at Realms of Chaos, for instance, you look at a Realms of Chaos campaign map, it's like, you have CA trying to make the pace of that campaign map for all Legendary Lords. It doesn't matter if we're talking Chaos Dwarves, with how long it takes to build their economy. Like, Chaos Dwarves are a really powerful race, but it just takes time for them to end up being steamroll. But the problem is, that's not how their games work in general. Like, that's the problem. Like, you might say, oh, some games did it better. No game did it better. Like, I don't care what you tell me about Shogun 2, for instance, or anything like that. No game handled this better. Every single Total War game was all about, like, even if people didn't realize them, played it, I guess you could say, inefficiently, all Total War games from Rome 1 were built around the idea of early game aggression. Some people can try and artificially slow it down, just doesn't end up being that particularly great. Oh, what about Attila? Okay, what about Attila? You think Attila is different? Oh, jeez. Like, the amount of battles you play within the first 30 turns as Western Rome and Attila, it's pretty biblical. Let's put it like that. But you can. And it's all about that early game aggression, not that 200-turn campaign. The problem is, Norsca is built kind of around the idea of a 200-turn campaign. They have mechanics around that. There's just flat-out better races. If you want to play Chaos, like, if you want to have a race that's focused on a melee roster, hyper-aggression, vassalizing the shit out of the map, Bellicor is available for free and you don't have to pay money for DLC. Let's ignore the fact that this is a DLC race in the game that if you didn't already pay for, you have to buy. Yeah, it's a crappy race. Don't buy it. They need fixes to actually be interesting. It kind of is interesting to talk about because for the longest time, ever since Norsca was actually introduced as a playable race, they were significantly better to play than Warriors of Chaos. But then Warriors of Chaos got reworked, so now they're significantly better. Maybe next time around when they rework Norsca again, hopefully they do rework Norsca again. Honestly, maybe it should be stated that Norsca shouldn't have to occupy any kind of territory outside of Norsca itself, because that would probably be very fitting in the lore, considering they're raiders, mainly, and fodder for the Warriors of Chaos. They're not looking to conquer the Empire, they're looking to burn it to the ground. That's something else to point out. Anyway, Questine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.